Hi, this is Chaplain Greg. Welcome to the Wandering Wesleyan and our Walking in the Word series. We're continuing through the historical books. And last week was a downer. Book of Judges is just dark and dismal. Well, good news. We have a beautiful, beautiful story to tell you today. And we're going to start with the book of Ruth. Um, Ruth is so wonderful because now, if you remember what I said, what I talked about earlier of how our Hebrew friends and our Jewish friends order their Bible, Ruth is not in the Ketuvim, or I'm sorry, the Nevi'im, the part of the prophets. So the prophets comes after the Torah in our Jewish friends' Bible. They put Ruth in the writings, but I'm really thankful that Ruth is after Judges in our Christian Bibles because it's such a refreshing book to read after you've gone through the dark passages of Judges. After all the death, immorality, injustice, we have a lovely story of a woman who is faithful to her mother-in-law. Ruth is David's great-grandmother. Rahab is Boaz's mother. Matthew 1:5. Boaz is going to come into the story in just a minute, but it starts with a famine in Israel. Naomi, whose name means delightful and lovely, and her husband Elimelech, which means God is king, and her sons Mahlon and Chilion leave their hometown in Bethlehem for Moab. Now, I mentioned last week that Moab was going to be important. Read Deuteronomy 23, 3 through 6. Israelites were not supposed to go to Moab. But anyway, they went to Moab. There the boys married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth, and all of the men died. Elimelech and his 2 sons, leaving in Moab, far from Israel, Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah. Ruth tells the girls, go back to your families, go back to your people, because my life is miserable. It's over. I'm going to go back to Israel, and I'm just going to die there. Orpah goes back, and we shouldn't blame her. See, in those days, the only way for women to survive was to have a man there supporting them. A husband, a father, a brother, a son. They didn't have any of that. Naomi's life was going to be miserable, and she was going back to Israel. Ruth, however, stays. And I want to read this one passage because it's probably the most famous passage in the book. But it's just beautiful. When Ruth is told, go back, Ruth says, don't plead with me to abandon you or return and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die. There I will be buried. May the Lord punish me and do so severely if anything but death separates you and me. So beautiful. And Naomi returns to Bethlehem with Ruth. And notice, Ruth is an illegal alien. She's not supposed to be in Israel. The law clearly states that Moabites are not to be in Israel. Israelis are not to go to Moab. They're not to meet. Because remember, going back, they tried to curse Israel. The whole nation tried to curse Israel. Remember Balaam and his donkey. What follows is a beautiful story. It's filled with family customs. A fellow named Boaz, whose name means quickness, and is a relative of Naomi, becomes her redeemer by assuming Elimelech's, that's Naomi's former husband, assuming his property, and he marries Ruth. And Ruth becomes the great grandmother of King David. It's a beautiful story. People who are new to the Bible, I encourage you to read that story. It's beautiful, it's inspiring, and it gives you a lot of hope that maybe something good can come from these people that so desperately screw it up.
So it started raining outside. So I decided to come in instead of getting rain on my head. But we finished up Ruth, and now we are going to go into some more historical books, and that is First and Second Samuel. Now, First and Second Samuel is actually one scroll, and we've split it apart to make it a little bit more manageable for us. But originally, this was all one story, the story of the judge Samuel, and Samuel is the last judge of Israel. From Samuel comes kings, and so First and Second Samuel are one scroll, and First Samuel is really about the first king of Israel, and that is Saul. Samuel probably started his scroll, but halfway through, about chapter 25 of First Samuel, halfway through the Samuel scroll, Samuel dies. So obviously it wasn't finished by Samuel. So a lot of these judges probably had disciples around them. And Samuel more than likely had a number of disciples help him finish the scroll and finish the story of David, who comes after Saul. It's also suspected that Samuel's school did some editing work on the Torah because the law is mentioned a few times within the Samuel scroll, and so these 5 books of the Torah would have been something that they would have used quite a bit. But his disciples probably finished the Samuel scroll with major editing during this period. Now, throughout the rest of the Old Testament, the emphasis is on the kings. Okay, we've been focusing on the priests from Levi. Remember, Moses and Aaron's family came from the tribe of Levi. The priests kind of moved to the background now, and now the kings from Benjamin. Oh, I thought you said Judah. Well, our first king is going to be from the tribe of Benjamin. Saul is from Benjamin, but still the priests are moving to the background. Now I want to read for you a quick little passage here, and this passage relates to what we're talking about. So we're going to go to Genesis 49, and we're going to read verses 8 through 12. Now, you've heard this before, but I'm going to read it again. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the necks of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. Judah is a young lion, the Lion of Judah. My son, you return from the kill. He crouches, he lies down like a lion or lioness. Who dares to rouse him? The scepter, that's a king. The scepter will not depart from Judah, or the staff from between his feet, until he whose right it is comes. Who could that be? And obedience of the peoples belongs to him. He ties his donkey to a vine, and the colt of his donkey to the choice vine. He washes his clothes in wine, and his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth are whiter than milk. All right, so we heard this before. This is this is Jacob, or Israel's blessing over his son Judah, and it is from the Lion of Judah that the kings are to spring. But what is it about Saul? He comes from Benjamin. Well, let's go back. So we start with Adam. And we go to Seth, Shem, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Levi, the son of Jacob, is important for a while, but they fade back. And now Judah. And out of Judah comes David. And all the kings of Judah come from the line of David, except for one. And that's the first king. That is Saul. Now, we have to talk about this group that is causing a lot of problems. It caused a lot of problems in the time of the judges, and they're going to cause a lot of problems for the nation of Israel as a whole. Especially the kings have to deal with them a lot, and that's a group called the Philistines. The Philistines came, we're not sure where they came from. They might have come from Greece or Turkey. They were sea people. They settled on the southwestern coast of Israel, where Dan was supposed to be. They were tough, so Dan said, forget it, we're out of here, and they fled to the north. They worshipped a god called Dagon. They were just really hard, tough people to deal with. And you're going to find the Philistines coming back all the time throughout the book of Samuel. But before we get into Saul, before we get into David, let's talk about Samuel a little bit. Samuel's mother's name is Hannah. Hannah is married and she can't have children. Now, her husband's other wife can have children. We've heard this before, right? But Hannah cannot. So she is praying for children. This is similar to Sarah. It's similar to Rachel, similar to Samson's mother. And it's going to be similar to Elizabeth when we get to the New Testament, to Luke. But after an encounter she has with the priest Eli, she gives birth to Samuel. God blesses her with a child, Samuel. So she dedicates this child to the Lord. So she puts Samuel under Eli's keeping. And there's a beautiful prayer of thanksgiving in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. I encourage you to go and read that. Now, Eli's sons, they're messed up. They're priests like Eli, but they are really messed up. They sort of treat the priesthood as a mafia family would. Taking things that don't belong to them, doing things that they shouldn't. They're going to be judged by God. But Samuel, who is living under Eli, receives a call from God, a very distinct call from God. And you can read it in chapter 3 where God actually calls out to Samuel. Samuel at first thinks it's Eli that is calling him, but it isn't. It's God who's calling him. So God puts a call on his life. At that same time, Eli's sons and the nation of Israel decide they're going to go to war against the Philistines again. And so they decide, they didn't talk to God about this, they just decided on their own to bring the Ark of the Covenant out with them. So right now, Israel is settled in what used to be known as Canaan, now it's Israel, and they've divided up all the territories. Well, if you remember, there was a tabernacle. There was the tent of meeting that needed to go someplace. Well, they put it in a town called Shiloh. And in Shiloh, that's where the tabernacle resided. And in the Holy of Holies, that's where the ark resided. So they went and got the ark. And after going in and confronting the Philistines, they get beat. And they get beat bad. And Eli's sons are killed. And after getting beaten by the Philistines, they treat the ark like an idol. The Philistines do, because they keep the ark. And remember, the ark is the presence of God. The ark is stolen, Eli's sons are killed, and when Eli hears that his sons are killed, he's riveted with cold resignation. But when he hears that the ark is stolen, he falls over and dies. So what really matters to him? It's the ark, the presence of God, that matters to him. Now, with the ark being with the Philistines, this causes all kinds of problems for them. Uh, it broke one of the idols they had to Dagon, really causing all kinds of havoc. So they kind of returned it back to Israel because it was for them it was bad juju. They didn't want that near them. We know it was carrying the presence of God, and the presence of God can't be around sin. It can't be around other idols, and other idols are going to be destroyed before it. So they got rid of it. It's at this point that Israel, the people of Israel, then demand a king. And in chapter 8, now Saul has taken over for Eli. He's grown up. He's taken over for Eli. Israel demands a king. And Samuel tells Israel, this is wrong. You shouldn't demand a king. But he goes to God and he says, God, I know this is wrong. They shouldn't be demanding a king, but what do you think? And God says, let them have what they want, and they're going to get what they deserve. So Saul is anointed king. God points Samuel to Saul, a Benjaminite. Saul on the outside looks like a great king. He's strong. He's tall. He's a good military leader. He knows what he's doing. However, he has some serious character flaws. And he has some serious things that he deals with in his life. So Saul becomes king. And this is where I'm going to leave it for today. Oh, leave you hanging. I'm always leaving you hanging. But so Saul is going to become king, and we're going to go through that. And then eventually David is going to become king. David from the tribe of Judah. But right now Saul's king. But until next week, this is Chaplain Greg with the Wandering Wesleyan. If you like this video, please subscribe and like it. Share it with your friends. And until next week, God bless.